Hey everyone, my name is Ernesto and today I want to go into all the recent changes I've made to my game and all the stuff that has been added since the last month or so. But first of all, thank you all so much for over 1,000 subscribers. That's pretty crazy. I've just recently started doing this and yeah, these numbers are a little overwhelming, but I'm really glad you like the game and you like the content. Thank you all also so much for all the feedback you already got me, all the nice comments. I always try to read them. Also, if you have something not so nice to say or some harsh feedback, I'm always open to that. So please keep that coming. I'm always trying to incorporate as much of that feedback as I can into the game if I think that, it could make it better, and it usually does. So let's start off with some combat changes. That's probably the biggest system that needs work, because it's supposed to be quite important in the final game, and combat always needs a bunch of tweaking in order to feel good. So the biggest change for that right now is that enemies can now be parried. So parrying works by simply blocking an enemy's attack right before that attack hits, and that parried enemy will then become stunned for a few seconds, allowing you to attack while the enemy can't retaliate. And that stunned enemy will also receive some more damage during that time. But if you attack an enemy while it's stunned, that will break that stun, so you can't just wail on that enemy for a few seconds, but you can get one big hit in. Also, you probably already noticed that the player is visible through walls with a silhouette, but the enemies weren't until now, and I kind of went back and forth on if I want the enemies to be visible through walls, and now I kind of made a version where the enemies are visible through walls, but only once they've seen you. So once they enter combat with you, they will be visible, and it hopefully will be a little bit easier to fight enemies even in an area where there are a lot of obstructions in front of the camera, because now you can actually see those enemies again, even if they are behind a tree. And something that's supposed to be combined with that is that the player's health has now been reduced from 10 to 5. So if you've played the game before the last update, you might have noticed that you start off with 10 health by default, and that made it quite difficult to die or get seriously injured in the starting areas, simply because you can basically just spam attack and really nothing big happens, because enemies just do 1 damage, and receiving 10 damage in one fight is pretty difficult. So now we are only at 5, so every hit kind of counts. If you get hit 5 times, you're dead and you have to, restart from the last checkpoint. So this is supposed to encourage you to play a little bit more tactically, to use also that new parrying system to, tactically parry an enemy's attack and retaliate while that enemy can't attack you. And I want to, go a little bit more into that direction, also with adding more weapons, hopefully in the future, that you're not just spamming attack, but you're supposed to watch the enemy and kind of learn what you're supposed to do. Right now, there's not much of that there yet, but I feel like we're getting closer to having like a good base, So this pairing system hopefully will give you the opportunity to actually get into that a little bit more, let's say a tactical headspace, and not just spam clicking attack. I've also just started exploring an effect called hit stop in combat. Hit stop is usually used in fighting games, for example, or in more arcadey jump and run games. I've thought about maybe incorporating it if it feels good. I'm not totally convinced yet, because hit stop means that at a certain point within combat we basically stop the whole game for 1/10 of a second, or maybe even shorter than that. So it's a very short amount of time, but in that time we stop the whole game, and after that we continue it, so you get a more impactful hit, for example. So I'm using it right now once you kill an enemy, so that final hit, kicks more. But I'm not sure if it reads as, that's supposed to happen, or if it feels more like a stutter in the game, or, a bug. So I'm, maybe if you want to try it out and give me some feedback if you like that effect. You can see it in the background right now probably. And if you feel like that might be something interesting, if that feels more impactful, or if that's just annoying. I'm not really sure yet. Also, someone in the comments suggested to make it possible to pull out a weapon while moving. I didn't really have that on my radar at all, but I looked it up, and yeah, it's kind of annoying that you have to pause whenever you want to take out a weapon, which is quite often. So now it's possible to pull out a weapon while moving, which, isn't a big change, but hopefully should make it a little bit more user-friendly. There also is a new enemy in the forest now. It's a daffodil, so a flower. And that daffodil will mostly be standing above you somewhere where you can't attack it and throw pollen at you. It's not supposed to be a very active challenge. It's mostly supposed to be a passive annoyance where it makes combat encounters a little bit more difficult by simply giving you something else to pay attention to instead of just the enemy straight across from you. And it kind of started by looking at the lore a bit, and if you haven't watched the last video, basically the forest itself is supposed to be angry with its inhabitants, or the village specifically. And so it kind of makes sense that the forest itself would also attack you, not just kind of possess small bugs to fight for it, but use the plants of the forest itself. So I want to do that more, and this daffodil is like the first step of that. I want more plants to become hostile in the future. The one small thing I already have is there are some roots in the forest now that will attack you as well, but they aren't very smart. I hardly would classify them as enemies. They are also more like, an annoyance or maybe a trap that is not really visible if you don't know how to look for it, but it's also quite hard to actually get hit by it. Also, a bunch of you already discovered that it is possible right now, hopefully not that possible anymore, but it was possible to die when picking something explosive up or in a very precarious situation, and then the game doesn't stop but just continues and you're just on the floor, but you can still move. That was a really weird bug. It might still be in the game simply because I can't find it myself. I don't know how you guys do it, but whenever I try to recreate that bug, I just can't do it. So I'm just trying to kind of fix all the leaks I can find so that it doesn't happen again. Maybe if you want to try the game out after this video and you somehow manage to die but the game keeps going, write me a comment and I will try to figure out where that issue is, because it's really difficult sometimes to find these issues yourself, and that is just one I can't do. I don't know why. Maybe it's my computer. Sometimes bugs appear on different machines differently. I don't know, but hopefully it's a little bit less common now. You might have also already noticed some visual changes in the footage. That is because we're now using different colors based on the heights of objects. So objects that are higher up will be lighter and objects that are down on the floor will be darker. You can see it at a small, gradient at walls and like big objects. But otherwise you might not actually notice it that much. But it should help, differentiate the different levels better and give you a better, idea where you are in the world, because before it was quite difficult, I feel like, to actually get a grip on, distance. So that should be a little bit more possible now. And also, I like the effect. It gives you a little bit more depth. I also made a few changes in the forest to make some elements a little bit more lore friendly. So first of all, we have these darkness doors where you need to deposit some currency you get from the enemies. So the darkness from the forest, basically, you need to return it to the forest in order to get through the door. And until now, I basically just used 2 totems with this shadowy door in the middle. And I feel that worked fine, but now I've added a real arch to it, and I feel like that works a little bit better to convey this door feeling instead of just this being like a random shadowy wall in the middle of nothing. So now it feels more like a door, and you actually deposit the darkness so it floats away from you into the door, so you get more of this feeling of, okay, I'm losing some of the currency, and there's not just, you know, a number going down somewhere, because that is not very immersive. And then second, we have some of these fight rooms in the forest where you need to fight some waves of enemies back to back. And until now they just, you know, spawned out of thin air basically. And I wanted to also adapt that to make it a little bit more lore friendly. So now there's this big totem in the middle of the arena, and there's some, you know, darkness, some dark smoke coming out of it once you enter this arena. And you actually see those like bolts flying out of it, and the enemies spawn from that, so they all kind of come out of this totem now, which feels a lot more well, realistic, or it feels a lot, it feels like it makes more sense, even though it doesn't, but it feels like you kind of understand more where these enemies come from now, instead of these just spawning randomly around the arena. Also, the grass has been adjusted to work with those visual changes a little bit better, so now there's for once just much more grass than there was before, and it should now copy the ground's color a lot better, so that it just like blends into the scene more and you know, fits that art style a lot more. And last but not least, we have some changes to the UI. First of all, there are some tutorials now when you open the backpack for the first time, because I've noticed while watching people play that they usually get on quite well while watching the visual tutorials within the world, but once opening the backpack they might become quite lost. If you've not played that many games before, you might be quite confused. So there are some more in-depth tutorials there now. You can also just, you know, click them away, skip them, but they should, you know, give a little bit more context on what you're seeing. And there's also now a start on the logbook, where you can reread all of those tutorials, and that's also supposed to be expanded with more tutorials and more, you know, info as we go. Also, that logbook is supposed to contain a diary at some point where you can actually read up on the quests you're following. Not exact quest descriptions, obviously, I just wanted to read like a diary, so you know, the player is supposed to talk a little bit about the encounters they've had, and you're supposed to kind of get clues from those diary entries on where to go and what to do. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. I've made some bigger changes on the dungeon I'm working on right now, but that one is very far from finished. I'm still really looking into the level design of that one, and will still take a while. So maybe I will talk about that in a future video, but I didn't feel like including it here as it's not really part of the game yet, and you can't really play it yet. But that is pretty much what, you know, the major chunk of my time went into. So hopefully I will be able to show that to you soon. Alright, I think that's about it. Thank you all so much for watching. Please, if you have any feedback or anything else, write them in the comments or on the discussion boards on itch, where you can also write something longer if you want. And I will see you again in the next video. Until then, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.